Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Edmund DeVoe. I'm the president of the New Jersey Cannabis Association. We are the state's first and largest trade association for the cannabis industry. We're really glad you could join us for actually this year's last Lunch and Learn. So before we get into Lunch and Learn, again, as a reminder, please feel free to use the chat feature. Make sure you're chatting with everyone. Network in the chat feature, who you are, what you might be looking for with respect to your cannabis journey. And then we would also like to take a moment and thank our sponsors. Our sponsors are Proteus 420, Financial Resources Federal Credit Union, Saks LLP, Burton Trent Public Affairs, Curaleaf, Garden State Green Energy, Dutchie, Puffin Entrepreneurs and Investors, Sprague Energy, our preferred energy partner. Thank you so much, Sprague Energy. The Sheet Metal Workers, Local 19, and of course, all of you. I want to take this moment, this opportunity, since this is in fact our last Lunch and Learn for 2022. It's amazing how quickly time has flown and how many episodes of Lunch and Learn we've had. I trust each and every episode was useful to you in some way and to your business. I want to thank Jenna Ray Russo, our new Deputy Executive Director. Jenna Ray, welcome to the family. I want to thank our Treasurer, Felice Twaddle. Felice, your work is amazing and all that you do to support the NJCBA. I want to thank all of our corporate members, all of our corporate sponsors, because without you throughout the year, none of this would be possible. I want to thank our individual members. Thank you all so much for what you do. Your contributions, your attendance at all of our events are equally important. So with this, and I'll probably say it again, but I wish you all a very safe and happy and merry holiday season. And with that, we'll get started. I would like to thank Bryan Murray of Acreage Holdings for joining us for this year's last Lunch and Learn. This is a great opportunity to have a conversation with somebody who I respect his professionalism and all that he's done. We've actually collaborated on a number of legislative issues and regulatory issues here in the state. I count him as a friend. And so, Bryan, thank you so much for being available and joining us today.
Thank you, Ed.
Great. So we'll jump right into it. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and your personal journey and how you arrived at this to be an officer in a major cannabis company.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, my background is in biotech. I was with Pfizer for 13 years. I did government relations, public affairs, all with the intent of trying to make sure that people had access to medicines and kind of creating an environment to help better people's lives. And when I left Pfizer, I got a call from somebody I worked with at Pfizer, Peter Caldini, who's the CEO of Acreage. And he said that, Acreage was trying to do many of the things that we had done at Pfizer, which was to create an environment where people who wanted access, and in this case to cannabis, safe, regulated cannabis, could get access to it. The other thing that was interesting, Ed, is whereas when I was in biotech, it really focused on health access and equity. One of the benefits of being in cannabis, at least in a lot of the recreational markets, is now we're looking at social equity and social justice. And that's been a real treat here in cannabis, is to not just focus on access to the products themselves, but to make sure that from kind of a generational wealth building and giving back to society and seeing some of the harms from the war on drugs, trying to be a part of reconciling that with where we're trying to go as a society now. And so I joined Acreage back in August of last year. I learned quickly in cannabis, you count in dog years. Every first down, there's no throwing the ball. Everything's a run play. But it's been fantastic to have partners like you and your organization here. It makes all the difference to have groups that understand the issues and can bring the partners together to advance them. It makes all the difference in the world. So thanks for all that you do.
Wow, thank you so much, Brian. That is really appreciated. And I think, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school when I say this, look, it takes a lot of companies to make this happen. It takes a diverse community to make all of this happen. And so I know sometimes we look at the larger companies that are in this industry, and look, if you're the big kid on the playground, people either fear you, but respect sometimes is hard to come by. And so when I hear about your background and the fact that you really do have a mission of helping people and a background of helping people, I think what we need to do from time to time is look at the individuals who are part of an organization and understand that individuals and their personal moral set contribute greatly to not only that company's culture, but to the community at large. So just wanted to say that, and thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Great. So in particular, of some of the work that we've done, one of the areas, and I want you to be as broad as you like with the conversation, when we talk about some of the challenges of being a cannabis company, whether you're a large company or whether you're a small company, some of those challenges remain the same regardless of your size. And so when we were talking and running around the halls of the State House here in Trenton, you and I actually coalesced around the challenges around 280E and the tax challenges. And so again, be as broad in the conversation as you like, but this is something that you've taken on, that your company has taken on, that we have lobbied and advocated to try and fix this challenge as it relates to how your companies grow. So if you want to, just dive on in, talk about your experiences with 280E, the company's position, and where we're going with respect to the advocacy.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks so much. And this is another point, as you said, where we've been able to collaborate. It was great to hear your testimony there. Assemblywoman Quijano really leading the charge there. She's been fantastic. And, Speaker Coughlin, so much support there. But Ed, what I'll do is, I know a lot of times when I mention 280E, just recently I was at chamber event in Connecticut and mentioned 280E, and I talked about it like everybody knows what it is, because you and I are kind of living this stuff. Everybody doesn't live it like we do. So let me back up a moment just to kind of level set. But I think some of the history is Congress, of course, through the 16th Amendment, has the right to tax gross income. And in 1970, there was, of course, the Controlled Substances Act signed by Richard Nixon that put marijuana as a Schedule I, meaning it has absolutely no value. It's there with cocaine and everything else. And what's interesting is then what you had is a case in 1982 where it's Edmondson versus Commission, but there was a drug dealer. He sold amphetamines and cocaine and marijuana, and they got him on tax evasion because just because something is illegal doesn't mean you don't have to pay tax on it. The 16th Amendment says legal or illegal, you have to pay tax on gross income. So if you're making any income, you got to pay tax. So that's what happened in this case. He gets nabbed, of course, for the illegal activity, tax evasion. And basically his argument is, I get to deduct a lot of what you're saying I owe taxes on. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in his favor and said, yeah, those, it's an illegal business, but these are legitimate business expenses. And of course, you can imagine Congress was like, because when Congress has the right to allow us to take deductions, they can give us deductions and they can pass laws where we can take tax credits. But the intent of the deductions and credits is not to participate in illegal activity. So Congress the very next year amended the tax code and added this section 280E, which in essence says if you're engaging in trafficking, and typically trafficking is defined as buying or selling or kind of along the supply chain. If you're doing that with Schedule 1 or 2 drugs, you cannot take usual and necessary business expenses. So as soon as that happened, back in the 80s, cannabis wasn't really legal, and so it was like, okay, you wanted to get, illegal drug dealers, you don't want them to take tax deductions, there you go. But then fast forward, and you have Colorado and California and Washington and Oregon, states starting to legalize recreational use and even medical use. And now there's kind of this discrepancy with this internal revenue code that says if it's illegal at the federal or state level, you can't deduct business expenses. And what we found then is cannabis operators who are operating in legal state markets still can't deduct, because again, just because the state says cannabis is legal, if it's still illegal at the federal level, then you're subject to the 280E tax. Sometimes it's called a penalty. It's actually not a penalty. And I say that because then you would be able to argue for the Eighth Amendment, which says, talks about how a government can't, have unjust kind of penalties and consequences for people that go like far and beyond the crime. And so the Supreme Court has ruled that it's not a penalty, it's a tax. So what's interesting is there's something else that I should bring up. Because states are legalizing cannabis, a lot of times people have said, well, what about nullification? And this is this concept that if the federal government is not enforcing cannabis in the states, and it's not, then does it nullify the CSA or the 280E? I mean, they're not doing anything about it.
Right.
Well, no, unfortunately. So what we found is that the Supreme Court again has held that just the lack of enforcement of the Controlled Substances Act doesn't negate 280E. And that's really different than a lot of other internal revenue codes, Ed, whereby if the IRS or whomever is not enforcing it, then oftentimes the tax doesn't apply. That's not the case in cannabis or with the Controlled Substances Act, unfortunately. So we find ourselves in this place where, as legit cannabis operators, we still can't deduct normal business expenses. And so the question becomes, well, what does that look like? I think if we were to take, for example, you have a cannabis business that makes $1 million in top line gross revenue. And then you're able to write off cost of goods sold, because cost of goods sold is something you take from gross revenue, not gross income. And so again, the IRS can only tax gross income. So if you have $1 million and let's say you can write off through COGS, let's say 650,000, it leaves that operator with 350,000 of, let's say, taxable income. Well, if you have a non-cannabis business, let's say you have write-offs of $300,000, then all of a sudden you get down to what you're going to pay tax on. Then is just that $50,000 that's left. But if you're a cannabis company, you don't get to write off any of that. You're going to have a realized income or taxable income of the whole 350,000, which is really unfair. And so what we're finding, Ed, is that apart from the federal government rescheduling, which fortunately Biden, is having the HHS look at that now, like does cannabis need to be rescheduled or even descheduled? We see efforts that people have talked about carving out 280E from the code. What if cannabis was legalized at the federal level? That would also take care of it. But what we're finding is in the absence of federal action, we're seeing states take action. And there's many states that have done what we call decoupling their state code from the federal code. So for those who might or might not be familiar, the states typically use your federal income tax as your state income tax, and then you start deducting things from there, and then it gets you your state income tax. Well, what states are now allowing is for if you're in cannabis and you get your state income tax, that top line number, they're allowing you then to now go back and deduct what you couldn't deduct from Internal Revenue Code 280E. So at least on your state taxes, you're getting a reprieve because the state has said it's legal. And here in New Jersey, why we, tip our hats to Assemblywoman Quijano and Speaker Coughlin and others who support this is it normalizes the industry. Why should you pass a bill that says cannabis is legal and then not allow operators to operate and do taxes as if they're legal? And so that's one of the things that we're pushing for now. And I know NCBIA has, taken a very strong stance on that. One of the things that's interesting, I just want to say about the bill is, we talk about social equity, and I think sometimes what happens is we might say, well, like in New Jersey, if we put a cap on the 280E bill, for example, that says, hey, well, only the people who make this much or less can take advantage of 280E. The problem for the whole industry is you're still penalizing the industry for being in cannabis because some people don't get the deduction. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to normalize the cannabis industry, right? That's what safe banking is about, normalizing the cannabis industry. That's what social justice is about, saying, look, there's nothing wrong with cannabis. So if somebody's sitting in a prison or a jail for a cannabis only conviction, why is that? Like we're trying to normalize this industry. The other thing we're trying to do, Ed, is we're trying to make the industry sustainable. Without access to banking through a Safe Banking Act at the federal level, it's very difficult to operate a cannabis business profitably because and to have loans to float you through this and that, it's a very difficult industry to operate in. So if we have a 280E tax that we currently have, that cost is not just hard for operators, but it gets passed down. So not only do the operators suffer, Ed, but the New Jerseyans are going to suffer because the higher the cost of cannabis is, the more likely people are to abandon the regulated market and go to whomever on the corner that they used to go to and get their cannabis there. And what we're trying to do is move people out of the illicit market into the regulated market so that not only can we build the direct cannabis market, but the ancillary market as well. A lot of the people on the call here are in the ancillary market. The ancillary market suffers when there's not safe banking, when there's not 280E reform. So 280E is a really big deal in the cannabis industry, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. So hopefully that was brought enough for you.
That was brilliant. To be honest with you, Bryan, that was brilliant. You touched on so many key points. And, when people hear me speak as the president of the association and they read our tagline that we're about a responsible, sustainable, diverse, and profitable cannabis industry, this goes to the very heart of that. When they hear me talk about the phases or the evolution of the cannabis industry, and we talk about the phases where we've been in the age of criminalization, we've been in the age of weaponization, thus the tax code that came back to bite us. And now that we're in the age of legalization, and I know people, again, get tired of me saying it, we want to get to the age of normalization. So the touch points that you made are right to the heart of why we exist as the Cannabis Business Association, why you and I are in the halls of the State House, making sure that these things happen, that we take the best policy approaches to make sure that we get to the age of normalization. So thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. In fact, let's talk about the consumer side of things, because usually when we do talk about 280E and other policy types of initiatives, we do take it from the manufacturer, the producer, the supply side. But what this really does do is it really does influence the consumer side. And so when we look at that, I loved how you pointed that out, because I think so often we forget anything that happens on the supply side affects the consumer side. Right. So let's stay there for a minute. Consumer side. In fact, this is great because we have a couple of questions. One question, an update on safe banking. I know you and I have been working on that. We in New Jersey have been pushing our U.S. senators, right? I mean, this is our conversation. Right. We're amongst friends. There was some real concern about one of our U.S. senators and how we were at the goal line and we just needed to punch it in, and all of a sudden somebody calls a timeout, right? To use the metaphor. So based on your updates, where are we now with safe banking?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's kind of, to use a baseball analogy, if we're going to be in the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, whatnot. So you got 3 pitches, right? So I think the first pitch down the plate was the National Defense Reauthorization Act, right? So and Mitch McConnell, like you said, was not for it. This isn't going to happen. We're not going to put something else in the NDAA. And so we learned that earlier this week. It was frustrating, but it wasn't surprising. Typically with the NDAA, it's a cleaner bill than most other bills. The Congress tends to say we're not going to put a lot of stuff in the NDAA if it's not dealing with national security. So it was somewhat of a longer shot, but when it comes to cannabis, you got to take every shot on goal you can get. So I'm mixing my metaphors now, Ed.
Right.
Stay with me.
That's okay. We're still in the same stadium, right?
That's right. But I'm going to mix my metaphors.
Right.
Then the next thing is there's, of course, the omnibus bill. So in lame duck, it's really important. This is kind of where there's one bill that a lot of people are adding on to. So that's why we call it an omnibus bill. But this happens in lame duck. And we're hoping that the safe banking attached to to this omnibus bill will pass. And that's what's happening now. Is there's a lot. I can tell you that a lot of people want to see safe banking passed. There are individuals who feel strongly about certain provisions and strengthening it here and tweaking it there. But people want in Congress to see safe banking passed. We do know that there are Republicans that have some concerns, but there's Democrats that have some concerns. But right now, what I'm hearing from a lot of people is it's about 75% chance. So the other thing I think that's important is individuals on this call to contact Senator Booker. That's really important. These individuals need to hear from those for whom safe banking will impact. I was just on a call with the Ohio Association. We had a great opportunity to talk with members from Senator Brown's staff. And one of his staffers said, these are the types of calls that we need to have. We need to hear from the constituents because they want to know that they're on the right track. And the fact of the matter is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and they give you a chance to be at the table. Call the office, send a letter, write an email, let them know what you think about safe banking and if you think it should pass. I hope you do call and say it should pass. But I mean, look, you're a constituent. You can say what you want to, whomever's on the call. But that's where we are now. The third pitch that we have, Ed, is a standalone bill. So not in the NDAA. If it's not in the omnibus bill, it would be a standalone bill that we try to pass in this Congress. That has a harder chance or a more difficult likelihood of passage, but it doesn't mean that it won't pass. And so, and sometimes it's one of those things where if it didn't pass in this one, it raises the likelihood over here. And then if it doesn't pass here, maybe it raises the likelihood here. But we're continuing to monitor, and there's a lot of people, for those on the call here, that are giving it a lot of effort. A lot of the operators that are in New Jersey go up to Washington and spend time talking with Congress.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. In fact, I think, it's funny when I engage our audience several times a year, I sometimes wonder if I'm too close to the subject, but thank you for that explanation. You might not want to answer, but this seems to be a technical question. We have had our CPAs and our accountants on Lunch and Learn. So Steve, thank you for this next question, but you may want to go back to one of our earlier episodes of Lunch and Learn because it may have come up. But Bryan, have you heard of operators using IRS code 471C as a resolve to 280E?
I have not, but that would be something I'd have to talk to the tax team. So I'm not familiar with that code.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So Steve, thank you for the question, but we have had our CPAs and accountants on Lunch and Learn. You'll find some of our CPAs and accountants on our website. Jenna Ray will put our website in the chat so that you can all check it out and maybe contact one of them and ask them directly. But it is a good question as everyone is trying to survive. So with that, Bryan, brilliant Lunch and Learn, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate all that you're doing. Again, the halls of Washington, the halls of Trenton, and in this region. So look, we really enjoyed your conversation today. A lot of great key touch points. And I'm sure people will come back and check out this episode. I do want to thank you once again for taking the time. With that, I'll thank our sponsors, Proteus 420, Financial Resources Federal Credit Union, Sachs LLP, Burton Trent Public Affairs, Curaleaf, Garden State Green Energy, Dutchie, Puffin Entrepreneurs and Investors, Sprague, our energy partners, do check them out. Sheet Metal Workers Local 19. Bryan, any last thoughts? Anything you want to convey?
No, just keep up the great work, Ed. Keep it going in 2023. Really great to be partnering with you.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for joining us for our last Lunch and Learn. We really appreciate you all being here. Again, I thank our corporate sponsors. I thank our individual members. I thank you all. I thank, again, Jenna Ray Russo, our Deputy Executive Director. I thank our Treasurer, Felice Twaddle, all of our board members, everyone. Again, from mine to yours, happy, safe, healthy holiday season. Whatever you do, do it safely. Enjoy somebody else's company. If somebody's looking for company, don't leave anybody out. Everyone could use a touch. Everyone could use that kind word. God bless you all. Thank you so much. Bryan, take care, man. I look forward to working with you in the upcoming year.
Thank you, Ed.